Welcome back to the Marketing Factor. Today I'm talking with Julian Modiano, founder of Akudo and Weavely. Julian has a rare background. He started as a PPC account manager at agencies like Merkle and Brainlabs, and then taught himself to code and became a Google Cloud engineer. I've used Julian's business Akudo for our business Cobble Hill. And I think what makes Julian's perspective unique is that he understands both sides of the marketing automation equation. He knows what marketers actually need because he's been in their shoes, and he knows what's technically possible because he builds the solutions himself. His clients range from agencies like ours to CPG brands to what else, Julian? How would you describe your array of clients?
Yeah, so Acuto started with a pretty simple idea that was I was working for Merkle, which is a really big agency, and we had a cool team that I was part of, which is the media solutions team, and we were building some really advanced like marketing automation solutions of all different types for our clients. And I realized that we were being put onto all of the pitches. We were winning clients. We were kind of like one of the cooler things that the agency did, I think. At some point, I realized that the small to medium sized agencies wouldn't really have the scale for it to make sense to hire like a team of developers and data scientists and engineers and all this kind of stuff. But they would still benefit from the solution. So we started Akuta to be that kind of outsourced team of the media solutions team for marketing agencies that wanted to get a little bit more innovative, wanted to have some more advanced automation, but not having the scale to really hire like a whole team of developers to make that come to life. So that was what we did with Akuta for 5 years, and we're still all going now. And then Weavely came from the realization that we were building a lot of data warehousing or a lot of reporting and automation on top of a data warehouse. And so we wanted to build something that made it really easy and cheap, essentially, for marketing agencies to get data into a BigQuery data warehouse so that we can then build all of these other things on top. And then we realized that actually maybe Weavely was really a pretty great product on its own, and so it became kind of its own thing, not just a tool to reduce friction for Akuto clients.
I had very limited experience with data warehouses or even Looker reports before I had met you. We had been using a couple different reporting suites, and they were just kind of skinned things. I think one was called Dash this. I forgot the ones that we were using when we transitioned to the one that you built for us. But what I think is interesting is the data warehousing stuff was new to me, but now it seems like with AI, having like your own data warehouse that you can plug into is pretty soon going to be like what every brand is going to wish they had.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I think especially like as all the platforms really take more and more control away and everything becomes like a kind of a black box, what really sets agencies apart is having all of that data that they have across multiple clients and for many years that sets them apart from, say, like a brand just wanting to do their own PPC. You can consolidate all of this stuff in one place. And then, as you said, like use AI and all sorts of other like solution, like tech that's much easier to build on top of that data foundation instead of having to rely purely on these black boxes that are doing their own AI, but they don't really give you any control.
Like outside of the data warehousing, like taking a step even further back to the actual marketing side of things, why is like platform reporting from Google and Meta getting worse and not better? Like to me, it seems like the actual like platform that the data that you're getting there just seems to me that less and less people are trusting it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a few things. A lot of it is regulatory. So like GDPR came out in Europe. I think there was something similar in California, and lots of countries over the world are making it harder for you to track. Apple on its own is just kind of spearheading like a complete crackdown on this kind of like cookie tracking that used to power most of that reporting. And so with that in place, it kind of takes away a ton of visibility, kind of whether the platforms want to or not. There's not much they can do, but I think they're probably also then taking advantage of that to model conversions more and more. And so you kind of have to just trust that what the algorithms that they've built are telling you what's correct. And I mean, to some extent, you can probably use them as some kind of guiding principle, but obviously they're going to be biased towards their own conversions. Like if you add up the conversions from Google and Facebook, they're never going to add up to like what you're actually seeing. In fact, the two of them might be even combined less of what you're seeing in like Shopify, for example. It's probably why it's getting a little bit worse. Like it's just harder and harder for them to actually track. And so with that, they're just taking more and more liberties maybe on how they actually go about telling you what's a conversion.
I mean, some brands use tools like Triple Whale, which gives them their own sort of, I guess, UTM parameter that dumps into their own triple whale dashboard so they can see more realistic reporting. And you'll see wide discrepancies between what Meta's reporting versus what triple whale will say actually should be attributed. And I think this makes it really hard for uh, our clients, to understand how they're actually, like, when they should actually be spending money, where they should be spending money, what's actually working. And in the past, we had done, pure attribution marketing, but now we're moving more towards, like an MMM style where we're mixing all of these things and hoping to just get, all right, let's instead of drilling down to the actual contribution margin of each particular ad, let's actually take a look more holistically at all these channels and how they're at play. How do you kind of help, like, what are your thoughts on the best way to decide what makes sense from an attribution standpoint?
Yeah, it's a good question. Also a hard one with not probably not a good solid answer. I think the short answer is it depends. I think you probably want to be doing a little bit of both if scale allows. So I think the multi-touch attribution type stuff is great for having like something that's a little bit more instant, like you can be more reactive to what's actually happening in the day to day. It's not going to be perfect, but I mean, nothing is perfect at this point. It's probably going to be better than what you're getting from the platforms for sure. Something like MMM obviously requires a different level of scale, and there's a lot of tools that make it easier and easier not to do that. But you still have to have some minimum amount of like data in there for it to actually make any sense. But if you can do it, that gives you a top level view of like where you should probably be investing your budget, and give you a better sense of like how channels are actually performing, which in a sense from that top level view is probably even more accurate than again, if you do it right and if you have enough data, then the multi-touch attribution, which isn't trying to like link specific things in the past where just parts of it are going to inherently be broken because of Safari and because of users changing browsers, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, the MMM will kind of give you a better idea of maybe where you have better opportunities from a top level of like, say, I want to spend 20K less on Facebook and put it into Google because that's actually what is working. But it's not going to be able to tell you like this ad is performing better than that ad. For that, you need some kind of attribution.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems to be where we're kind of balancing in terms of the way that we report and analyze and strategize for our clients. The majority of them are, they're spending on Google, Meta, some TikTok, some Pinterest, some Microsoft, and then of course email channel too. And what I think is like always so wild is how every single platform wants to take credit, and the ones that end up doing it the most seem to be email, right? And seem to be Pinterest, actually, and I think it's because Pinterest, from a look back standpoint, they're looking back 30 days sometimes, and you can change these view types, of course, of how far they're looking back. But we find that as you narrow that window, Pinterest has less impact. And so I think blending these pure attribution and just taking a step back and looking, okay, where are we spending, is kind of the only way to do it. But it also makes it more challenging to know, okay, when is it time to test a new channel here? Because you can just start over optimizing towards one particular channel. What do you think is actually like, when is it important for a brand to actually have a data warehouse, and when maybe they're not quite ready for it?
I think for brands, it's a different question than for agencies. I think for agencies, we're at a point where I would say pretty much right away for most agencies, unless you're really, really tiny, it probably makes sense. For brands, if you're like a really smaller, smaller brand, you don't have loads of data, you're only marketing on like a couple of channels, it might not be super necessary. Again, given how low the cost for some of these are, I'd still say it's probably worth having, but it might not be as essential. I think where it really becomes more and more crucial, I think, is for agencies, where that's really like the amount of data that agencies have is one of their biggest, what really sets them apart, what really makes it worth hiring an agency rather than doing things internally. Not only, obviously, there's a ton of other stuff like expertise, and I'm sure you know those things better than I do, but from a technical point of view, having all of that wealth of data is something that really sets them apart, being able to like compare different clients across their portfolio and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it depends on the scale. For brands, yeah, you'd have to maybe like the smallest ones wouldn't make sense, but for agencies, I think it pretty much always is worth having a data warehouse.
One other cool thing you guys do a lot of is like automations. And I feel like the automation aspect of what we're seeing is more and more people want that with AI, with thinking through how to start like triggering ideas based on certain KPIs hit or something like that. Why do most marketing automation projects fail?
Loaded question. I like it. I think it's because there's like a big bit of a disconnect between like a lot of, so this is what we hear a lot, especially when we take on projects that are like halfway started and didn't never got completed for whatever reason. Like the marketers on one side that have like some great idea of what they want to build, but absolutely no technical experience. And then there's some developers that know nothing about marketing and are great developers. And so when they're trying to communicate, it's quite common for people to end up investing significantly more resources in a tool that doesn't work as well as it should, because the developers don't really fundamentally understand, not always obviously, but the objective of what's being built. So I think that's one of the reasons where it's like a disconnect between the people who want something to be built and the people doing the building. And then a lot of times it's also like, I've seen this a lot where it's kind of hard to define exactly what would count as a success, essentially. And so you end up seeing these things that end up spiraling with more and more nice to haves being bolted on to like a solution with like everyone in an agency or everyone in a team like pitching into like what they want to build. And next thing you know, you have like some really convoluted thing that never works because there's way too many edge cases and like no one's happy and the developers are super stressed out because they've been building something that doesn't work for ages, and the agencies kind of getting annoyed because they've been wasting like money down the black hole. So I think it's just like a difficulty, I think, in understanding, like clearly articulating what should actually be built between like non-technical and technical people and non-marketers and marketers.
What should you like right now? What do you see people delegating towards automation versus what like an actual human being marketer should kind of be more owning?
I mean, I think so. Again, with AI and with tools like N8N and like Make and that kind of thing, the lines are definitely getting blurred. Like I've talked to some marketers that at this point are building some pretty sophisticated like automation flows themselves because it's just getting a lot easier. So I think it really is, it comes down to like how much experience either side has in the other side's domain, essentially, and just trying to find a way to really like nail down what actually is. I think actually, it's taking a step back. I think that and this comes down to basically all tech, is figuring out what an actual MVP is, like committing to building something that works for at least one use case and building that first. I think I've seen like a lot of people have a tendency to try and like account for every possible edge case and every exception and everything that they can think of. And the result is like a product that never gets built and never satisfies everyone.
Yeah, totally. Does every agency need like a developer in-house in the future, do you think?
That's interesting because, to be honest, I feel like developers as a whole are at risk of being replaced by AI in the next few years. So we'll see about that. I don't know if every agency needs a developer. I think if you're big enough, and like quite big, I think I'd say I would say you need one. Otherwise, it depends. I know some agencies, with a few friends that work there, where they've taken a very technical approach where like everyone basically can write SQL and can make API calls, and their whole USP is being essentially like a combination of developers and marketers. And then there's other agencies that focus purely on the strategy, the creative side. And then for them, I think if there's one slightly more technical person, they can do a lot with, as I said, like tools like Make and AI and stuff like that. So no, I wouldn't say it's something that every agency will need, and I think probably that need will decrease, if anything, as AI develops into more and more of a force.
What about marketers in general? That will they decrease too in terms of people needing them?
I mean, this is fundamental questions. If you ask me, like in 10 years, everyone was doing something on computers, probably be out of a job. But that's pessimistic. I'm obviously exaggerating here, a bit tongue in cheek. But I don't know. I think in general, it'll be interesting. But AI is definitely gonna shake things up. And I think there's a lot of optimistic views of like, oh, it's just a tool. It's gonna make us more efficient. We can do more. But I think there's the other side of that might be that we see like a reduction in just generally anything that's being done on a computer. That's so far doesn't seem to have happened too much. So we might just keep hiring the same number of people and just have way more efficient marketing campaigns and way more work. An agency, instead of having 100 clients and 10 employees, will have 1,000 clients and 10 employees. That's possible too. So we'll see how it goes. But I tend to be pessimistic on that side.
Yeah, there was a huge report that MIT put out, I don't know if you saw it in July, and it was, it was basically saying how the majority of workers now, what they're seeing is they're utilizing AI, but it's complete slop in what's being delivered. And it's people feeling like they can just use this tool, dump something in, get a brief, if you're talking about a marketer, and just pass that off with very little, checking or QAing of what the output even is. And so people get that and then they go through the process themselves of reviewing it and being like, what is going on? And they put it into AI. So it's just this slop fest that's happening. And so I think there is an advantage of like real human brain powered thinking into how can we actually utilize, like, know these tools, understand AI tools, but not have them produce slop and do it in an efficient way. And one of the ways is actually, I think, that AI is powerful is on the marketing automation side of things, when it not necessarily the creative aspect, but bridging data together is really where you find the most power, because I don't necessarily think the output of what you get from ChatGPT or Claude or anything like that. Creative's fine, but like you can tell when something's written by AI, and that will not
Yeah.
that will just become more ubiquitous. So you will stand out by not using AI. You already see it on LinkedIn, right? You see the people that aren't writing with AI, you can like tell, you're like, oh, that's actually, I
Yeah.
like that post. And then you see the people that write their stuff with AI and you're like, oh my God, like, what are you saying? This is not how you talk, And I think that
Yeah.
that's where like the edge is going to come in. If you want to talk about an AI slop fest, like look at LinkedIn.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of, I'd spend a lot of time there, and the things that you see that are impressive are the things that are not generated by AI on that
Yeah.
platform.
No, I completely agree. The AI generated stuff on LinkedIn in particular is just so obvious and it's just so useless. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Especially when you can tell it's just been like literally write me a post. It's not even like you give it an ideas and you get it to write it up for you, but there's like some originality behind it. You just didn't bother writing it. Like that, I guess fine. It's still like it's not I wouldn't call it slop, maybe it's not ideal. But
No.
there is some that's just literally generic crap. It could be written by anyone about anything. And it's just adding no value at all.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess the point that we're both in agreement on is there is some need for like knowledge-based workers in the forms of actual living, breathing human beings that can create, at least from the creative side. From the
For
marketing
sure.
and from the data side, I think there needs to be a point where the data has to be checked, like there has to be someone there, a real live human being who can actually, like, if something breaks, AI has a real tendency to like continue going down that path and not knowing that something's broken. So there is like this careful balance in data between automation, like where it fits in the marketing stack, And I think that we really have to you have to have someone there that can reduce that risk of something like that happening. How do you think about that?
Yeah, funny enough, I think with the data side, AI is actually less useful in many ways than in some other things. I think especially when you're talking about data pipelines and stuff, we're quite far away from being able to tell an AI to like connect to Google, pull the data you want, and put it somewhere. Like I see this just because of like how convoluted some of these APIs are. Like the fact that I write code and talk to like and use AIs to like help me write some code more efficiently, and still like they get so much stuff wrong because so much of the API documentation is just terrible. So I think AI can become quite useful eventually to like do some of the checking potentially, but that's a really good point. I see it. I think we're quite far from being to a point where you don't want a human to like double check some numbers every now and then and make sure that gives things a reasonable sense check, and then interpreting it as well. I think this is something where actually we've built some tools that like automate commentary in the past or like make reporting like completely standardized. And I think if you take the human away from reports completely, you might even have a report that's, let's say, even better than what a human was doing before, but you're kind of missing half of the reason you'd want to do a report in the first place is so that the account manager knows what's going on in an account and can talk about it to a client. If you have an AI doing all of that, then account manager is going to be kind of flying blind and not knowing what's going on in their own account. I mean, not completely, but it's
Yeah.
just a good kind of like moment to like stop and think like what is actually happening here. Like it's great to automate things so you're not like copy pasting numbers from spreadsheets that we still see like a lot of people doing. That's a total waste of time. But like sense checking and like looking at an account 30 minutes every week or something, I don't know, something like that
Yeah.
probably add value, whether you can automate it or not.
Yeah, totally. That's a really good point because we had thought a little bit about, hey, how can we kind of like automate this commentary? Like that would be an interesting thing to, but really the value is getting your hands dirty and like going in there and understanding the data and like seeing a little bit, like manipulating things. And that's how you actually, that's what people pay an agency for, right? They don't want a complete autonomous solution out there. They could just buy something off, they could just let Meta run it itself,
Yeah.
just throw a bunch of ads up there and let Meta run it itself, which ultimately is probably going to happen in the future, like that stuff is getting less and less. You're having less and less ability for Meta and for Google to actually go in and get custom and find these little like, hidden gems there. So it really is the MMM style of thinking about this is really where I feel like an agency superpower is.
Yeah, 100%.
Why do you think that that AI in general is good? Like what is good about AI for the actual aspect of what we do as marketers?
It's a good question. So I think in general, I'll talk from personal experience. I from a marketing side, I haven't. The last time I was managing a Google Ads campaign, I remember like being outraged at the new Google Ads UI. So this was years ago. The new probably isn't even the new one anymore. I'm talking about the ones like 6 years ago when they changed. I think it helps make a lot of boring, inefficient things much more efficient. So things like, I don't know, mass writing ad copy and like testing, like figuring out like new keywords, and a lot of this stuff where like you can't assign it completely to an AI, but you can start like, okay, these are like some keywords, this is some ad copy, like this is a landing page, help me like flesh this out. And then again, definitely not copy pasting everything across directly, but as like initial starting points, and especially for like more basic things, I think even it's getting to the point where it is quite reliable. That said, I was actually just setting up some campaigns for our own account, like or one campaign or 3 ads that we run every now and then. And I tried like the Google Ads like AI setup or something, and I was pretty horrified by the things it was recommending. I think we're quite far away, or I don't know, maybe we're not that far away from it. But from the little experience I had, like hands-on in Google Ads at least, it didn't seem like we were anywhere near being able to just say like, hey, build me some ads and run it, because if I had, it would have been a disaster.
Yeah, I think it's there's an aspect of it where it's a really good starting off point for something like that. Hey, look at my competitors. Here's some examples of what my competitors are doing. Analyze this data. Give me some ideas based on this, and then give me just like framework for how I should think about this and where I should bid. And then taking that, that's when the human comes in, It's
Yeah.
like don't just that's kind of like it just gets you to a closer jumping off point.
Yeah, for sure. I think on the more advanced side, you have things like MCPs where you can connect all of your data, like you were talking about the data warehouse, or like any kind of like big data that you have, and connect it to something like Claude, for example, and then being able to query your own data. I think that can be quite powerful as well. So when you can start like asking, and I think I was just in talks with this guy who built a tool that you can ask it, like type in like a question or something, it'll build a whole report for you with like commentary and graphs and everything based on your own BigQuery data and your data warehouse. I think is a really cool application of AI, just helping you get like insights really, really quickly. So again, like a human's actually doing the interpreting, but being able to like not have to like even mess around in Looker Studio, as easy as Looker Studio is, but just being able to say like, hey, I want to report this showing me like X, Y, and Z and plot it against this and add these dimensions. That's going to be super powerful, I think, when we get to the point where we're not quite there yet, but I think we're moving in that direction.
Yeah, for sure. That is like I built one I use a note taker called Granola, and I use the MCP, and I basically did all this through like vibe coding it myself. Like looked it up. It was like, here's some documentation, here's API, created an MCP where it pulls, I can reference my past calls through Granola, in Claude, having my own MCP running. And it's been super useful. Like it'll probably inevitably break at some point, but it's like the more times that it's like I'm technical, developed websites and stuff, and I know how to do terminal commands and stuff like that, but I'm not like it's been a long time. Been running an agency for a long time and not having to do that. But having a little level of familiarity with some of that stuff goes so far, you know? It gives
Yeah.
you such an edge, and that I think, and you'll see it a lot with, you know, kids that are coming up now. I mean, I'm 41. Kids that are 20 years younger than me, by the time they're, you know, in their 40s, they're gonna have so much more of a different level of technical acumen, and so many more tools. It'll be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I have a suspicion that it might be possible that they actually end up less. I don't know. I mean, the AI will probably develop to a point where they need it less, but at the moment, I can see it kind of hindering your knowledge development. As you said, like having that little bit, you can do so much,
Sure.
and obviously, the more you know, then the more, even more you can do. But I think it's harder to get to the point of learning a lot when you have something that makes it really easy to like. I've noticed this myself. Like one of the things I used to love about coding stuff was just having to learn things and figure things out and go in and like trial and error stuff. And that's not completely been solved, but like a lot of it is just like, okay, I don't know what to do. I don't have to like pour through 20 different Stack Overflow questions. It's kind of like you ask a question to an AI, and it's going to give you a pretty good solution. So I can see it also going like the other way, where people that are starting to learn to code now will be missing a lot of the basic knowledge, but then again, they probably just won't need it. Like, don't need, at some point we need to stop needing to like add like do mental maths or like remember stuff because Google, and now we're just going to get to a point where you don't need to know how to code because it does it all for you.
Yeah, it's a little scary about that. That scares me for sure, because part of learning is the deep work that goes into some of that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, becoming an expert on it, you need to have hours and hours of doing this stuff. So I could see that knowledge work, 10 years from now. I wonder if like brains get smaller or something.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I saw it personally myself. I was building like a Looker Studio community visualization over the weekend, just kind of for fun. There's like no documentation on this. There's barely any examples. And so AI was completely useless. And I found myself like struggling initially because I was like, oh, wow, this is like back to the old school. And the first hour was like really frustrating. I was just trying to get AI to help me on stuff that it literally couldn't help me with. And then the next 3 hours was the most fun I've had, like building something in a long time, because it was just going back to like, okay, like purely me and my own brain, like trying to figure out how to actually build this, which was quite cool, but also kind of scary. I was like, wow, that used to be just how I did everything.
Yeah, yeah. I know the feeling, like looking at like a Stack Overflow, like digging in deep. Which I guess I need, they probably have positioned themselves to be like a reference point for OpenAI or something. Like now they've probably got some sort of licensing agreement. So hopefully they don't go anywhere, because there's so much data on there in the past. And I'm sure that's how they train a lot of their models, because that does seem to be the one thing that does seem to be something that like AI is really good at, is kind of like maybe not figuring out exactly where the issue is, but like you can troubleshoot things
Hmm.
pretty quickly with AI,
Yeah.
even just standard chat GPT just off the shelf. I feel like sometimes I can just throw something in there, because we'll get things that break all the time or something, and just, hey, what's a simple fix here? Here's the code. And it's like, oh, that was so easy. Do you do you have like any thoughts on where you think, like, let's say an e-commerce brand should be spending the majority of their money, based on like where, what you see in general in terms of marketing through all the data that you come across? Like, do you feel like Meta is still a really good place for, like, let's say a fashion brand to be spending money, or should they be starting to look towards other things or reducing their ad spend? How do you kind of like think about it?
So that's a good question. To be completely honest with you, it's not a question I'm in the position to answer. Like we specifically stay away from that kind of thing. We try to be very like tech focused. So we worked with a lot of agencies on like providing tons of data, building reports, making it easier for them to access the insights. But ultimately, we're now like developers. I haven't managed any actual hands-on campaigns other than like three like ad groups for our for like Weavely for like 5 6 years. So we don't really look into that. I honestly couldn't tell you.
Do you find that a lot of the dashboards that and tools that you guys are creating, do they end up utilizing TikTok a lot? Are you having to pull in like TikTok data and into Weebly and stuff like that? Is that a pretty big aspect of it?
Yeah, for sure. So we've definitely noticed that rise in TikTok, because even like a couple of years ago, I don't think we had I think we built our first ever TikTok solution. I want to say maybe even like a year ago, maybe even less than that. maybe around a year ago, which is wild to think about now because now we added it to Weavely. Yeah, about a year ago, and now like a ton of clients have it. I don't know the numbers, but it's a significant percentage. So from our perspective, at least, we saw it like rise pretty quickly from like something that we heard about, and we kind of we offered like free TikTok projects to a lot of agencies because we wanted to like try it out, but no one even took us up on like building a free script for TikTok or something like that until last year, where we got a project for building something custom. We added it to Weavely, and now all of a sudden everyone's using it in Weavely.
Nice. How do you see like the future of how your business evolves?
So we're seeing, so it's kind of, we have two businesses at the moment. Acuto is the kind of consulting side, and we're definitely seeing that Weavely is the kind of data warehousing platform. We're seeing a lot more growth on the Weavely side for sure. So the way we're seeing it evolving is Weavely is growing quite fast, and we're getting a lot more clients that are kind of interested in consolidating their data into a data warehouse, not paying the exorbitant fees that like funnel charges, not dealing with like the super metrics like and constant breaking, and just kind of own their own data in a BigQuery data warehouse. That means that, you know, if they don't want to work with us at some point, they still have all their data. They could just plug in something else that gets it into BigQuery, and it's kind of like they can just keep going where they were. And Acuto more and more is becoming kind of like a almost a partner to Weavely to like sell additional, like not sell, like to help clients build like more advanced solutions on top of Weavely if they don't have the technical experience in-house.
Yeah, cool, man. It seems to be like a really good position to be in, and like to be able to balance both of them. You can kind of like test out stuff on the Akudo side and then build it out, you know, and then having the Weavely thing set up. I mean, we've been super happy with Weavely, and you guys are always super responsive with us, and hope you don't get to the point where you're a funnel and you're upcharging us in terms of.
No, we're not. We're planning. Hopefully, we don't plan on getting there. I mean, on doing that, we plan on getting as big as funnel, but not doing that. But yeah, that's definitely been helpful because we've obviously built the solutions hands on for so long that we know we have kind of like a insider knowledge almost on what actually is valuable for agencies, which gives us kind of a bit of a head start, I think, in terms of like what we're building and how. And I think it explains why Weavely clients tend to be quite happy with how the platform works, how intuitive and easy it is to connect stuff, just because we've been building those solutions for so long. And Jana, from our solutions architect, has been building those hands-on for 5 years now. And so when she tells us like, hey, this is going to be like really annoying if we build it this way, we can know for a fact that like, okay, that's probably going to affect every agency that would potentially use that feature.
Nice. And you're in Barcelona, is that right?
Kind London? Of between London and Barcelona. Yeah.
Yeah. Just what's your go-to spot for those coming to Barcelona? Where should they go eat?
Go-to spot for eating? I'm the wrong person to ask for this. I tend to like cook a lot at home.
Oh, nice.
I can say something controversial now, but as an Italian, I'm not overly impressed with the food here. I love everything about the city except for the food.
There you go.
Leave you with that bombshell.
Nice. What's the last great book that you read?
It's a great book that I read. Actually, the one that comes to mind is called Great Circle by, I want to say, I'm really bad at remembering. Let me just look it up. Maggie Shipstead. It's one of these like books that jumps around over like 100 years of like a family, and
love it.
Just kind of an epic. Yeah, it's just incredible. Strongly recommend it. It's probably one of my favorite books ever.
Oh, this looks awesome. I'm definitely picking this up. Julian, thanks so much for coming on the Marketing Factor. Where can people find out more about you and Weavely and Akudo?
Probably LinkedIn is the easiest one. Otherwise, weavely.io for our website. But yeah, I think you just go to LinkedIn nowadays. You can just find everything from there. It's a couple of clicks away.
Yeah, and no AI slop on your LinkedIn. We'll keep it clean on there.
Yeah, I try to just post a couple of videos every now and then. So yeah, definitely avoid the AI.
I love your videos. Love the videos. Cool, man. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great talking to you.